Justice David Crossan told the jury that although the men are being tried together, their guilt or innocence should be determined individually. All too often, we think of Metro Vancouver as the epicenter of the toxic drug crisis, but rural areas, and in particular northern BC, are being hit far harder, and services that might help keep people alive lag behind the needs of the community, despite a higher death count per capita. Kate Partridge has more.
The volunteers at this Dawson Creek drop-in center are expecting another busy night.
And then we have our small kitchen here that we put in, and basically we're just reheating food up, right, that's been donated.
The Society for Narcotic and Opioid Wellness, known as SNOW, is a peer support group for anyone close to the toxic drug crisis. Cheyenne is one woman who visits regularly.
The way people come together and to feel safe is amazing.
But SNOW was set back this summer after a fire forced them to move, making it harder for people like Cheyenne to stay connected.
We see anywhere from 15 to 30 people right now. When we were over at our original space before the fire, we were feeding up to 65 people a night.
They moved into a new place last month, but securing that lease was an uphill battle after the city rejected an initial location.
Where is the best location for an OPS service? Well, it can't be parochially just at your own viewpoint. It has to take the consideration of our community into that discussion.
Drugs are not currently used on site, though SNOW is applying to Northern Health for that to happen. Caitlin Shane says the city is not meeting expectations set out by the BC government.
So it's just been kind of one thing after another. And ultimately, this is a space that is required by way of a ministerial order, and it shouldn't be this hard to save lives.
That ministerial order, issued in 2016, requires health authorities to establish overdose prevention services wherever there is need. There is undoubtedly need in the community of Dawson Creek. As of August this year, 15 people have died in the Northeast from toxic drugs. 5 of those deaths have been in the Dawson Creek area. But it was not until this year that the first overdose prevention site opened in the Northeast. That OPS here in Dawson Creek finally opened in May, a delay the chief medical officer for Northern Health attributes, at least partly, to the pandemic. He also says their strategy evolved.
The other part is that the evolution of overdose kind of response that at the beginning, one of the main focus is ensuring the naloxone is available, more broadly available.
Advocates like Pivot Legal say the province needs to push health authorities and cities everywhere to do more.
It's also been the case in Langley. It's been the case in Maple Ridge. I know that there's been challenges in Fort St. John, I believe. So it's a very common pattern.
In Dawson Creek, Lyric says they have no option but to keep Snow House open and are hoping to operate the city's second safe consumption site. Kate Partridge, CBC News, Dawson Creek.
BC has been selected to receive federal funding for a dozen clean fuel projects. Ottawa is kicking in close to $800 million for 60 projects across the country. Some of these include hydrogen, renewable diesel, and natural gas. And 7 of these will be in BC, with $2.2 million going to Fortis BC to build 3 natural gas refueling stations in Delta, Kelowna, and Abbotsford. $1 million is going to the University of British Columbia to install a hydrogen refueling station.
Government will be funding 5 fuel types across 7 provinces and territories. These projects will accelerate important work to help Canada achieve its ambitious environmental and economic objectives.
The Clean Fuels Fund started in June 2021 with the goal of investing $1.5 billion to boost the production of clean fuels in Canada. Global retail and tech giant Amazon is reportedly set on laying off 10,000 employees. The bulk of the reductions will be coming from the company's corporate and technology divisions. And according to reports first published by the New York Times, the cuts amount to 3% of office staff. It's not known if the move will impact Amazon's Vancouver footprint. Its new downtown headquarters is slated to open next year and employ more than 6,000 people.
By reducing the exposure that they have, keeping themselves with a little bit of capital in their pockets, they can react more deftly to market conditions as they change. We've seen Amazon do very well in Canada. And I don't think that we are one of the first places where a lot of these layoffs, if there are going to be any further, will be coming from. This is absolutely, it's a trimming, but I don't know that we're going to see a massive impact on the Canadian workforce on the whole.
The Seattle-based corporation is predicting slower sales this holiday season, saying inflation and higher fuel prices will bite into Christmas shopping budgets.
80% of the protesters were probably likely to go if they had the right offer.
The inquiry into the Trudeau government's use of the Emergencies Act during the Freedom Convoy protests in Ottawa is into its final phase. We'll get the latest, after the break. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Well, fast fashion has been a persistent environmental problem around the world. An entrepreneur in Edmonton gives us a look at her textile recycling facility and tells us how she doubled the size of her operation.
Upcycling and recycling clothing locally is very, very important. So garment recycling takes a piece of clothing that has been worn and we turn it into a new product, a longer lasting product than the garment would typically have. We will receive the garments from the public and then we sort them into good or bad, and then the good garments go out for wholesale to the public. They can come in and shop by the pound because they're still good clothes, and then the not good clothing goes through a sanitization process, and then we put them into one of our different products. So we sell bulk textiles and clothing that can be recycled and upcycled by local makers. So we're putting that material back into the cottage industries, and then we also make our own products in-house to use up the rest of it. So we use the sale of the good clothing to support the recycling. I'm making a potholder rug, and these are all of the stretchy items. So like the single socks are in here, long underwear, like anything that isn't useful to be worn again. We have even some like corporate logoed t-shirts and stuff, and they get cut into loops, and then these rugs will last for as long as the materials take to decompose. So that can be 40 years, it can be, some of these materials take up to 200 years to decompose, and some are even unknown. I really am passionate about empowering people to be creative, be innovative, and we know there's a textile waste problem. We aren't having the clothing and textiles exported out of the country, so we're keeping the resources for people to make things and take care of basically our waste right here. So that's the goal of garment recycling.
The inquiry into the Trudeau government's use of the Emergencies Act is into its final phase. Today, the Commission began hearing from government insiders. Marina von Stackelberg has more on today's testimony, where the focus was on the challenges they faced, from intelligence sharing to emergency preparedness.
For 3 weeks, the downtown streets of the nation's capital were occupied. Top federal public safety officials say the RCMP and CSIS never warned them to prepare for the protesters' arrival. Once they got here, there was no plan to get them out.
There was considerable debate behind the scenes as to what the strategy would be for enforcement, and kind of a chicken and egg situation where the various police forces involved were waiting for a clear a plan of action before they mobilized.
Instead of going to the Ontario Provincial Police, City of Ottawa Police asked the RCMP for help, but the Mounties are not contracted to do daily policing in Ontario.
To get RCMP officers into Ottawa required them to be mobilized outside the province, and that requires, some paperwork.
It was also unclear who was negotiating with protesters. Federal officials drafted a plan to meet with those occupying Ottawa, not to hear their demands on public health orders, but because if they felt heard, they might go home. And that would make a takedown of the remaining protesters easier.
80% of the protesters, particularly 2.5 weeks into the protest, where they'd been sitting on the streets of Ottawa in freezing weather, were probably likely to go if they had the right offer.
That meeting never happened, but when the Ontario government decided it would offer to sit down with blockade protesters in Windsor, it gave the federal government little warning to join in.
There was no way on an hour's notice that he was going to get a decision to sign on.
The mayor of Ottawa also cut a deal with protesters to move some of their vehicles. The federal government only heard about that when the plan was in place.
So would it be fair to say that there's sort of these different branches of potential engagement going on with not perfect sight over all of them?
No coordination at all.
No coordination at all. Okay.
In these final 2 weeks of the inquiry, the public will get an inside look at the federal government's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act. High-ranking cabinet ministers and the Prime Minister himself will testify. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada has taken new action on Iran, designating it a regime that engages in terrorism and gross human rights violations. It has now banned thousands of senior Iranian officials.
This means that the architects of oppression, including members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, will never set foot in Canada again.
Also affected, Iran's head of state, senior members of government, the military, and Iranian intelligence. Canada and its allies have imposed tough sanctions since a young woman's death in police custody triggered a massive protest movement. In response, the regime has imposed its first death sentence. Human rights activists fear many more are to come. Iranian state media says the unnamed person now facing execution was convicted of setting fire to a government building. In a statement, the White House expressed its concern about, quote, mass arrests, sham trials, and now a death sentence for protesters voicing legitimate demands. The hundreds of protesters already killed at the hands of Iranian state authorities deserve justice. Canada has been given a failing grade on its efforts to tackle climate change. This country ranks 58th out of 63 countries included in the new Climate Change Performance Index. It was put together by a German environmental and development organization. And Susan Ormiston has more on the report, which has been unveiled at the COP27 conference in Egypt.
Canada's a slick presence at COP27, but behind the image, the facts are not so pretty. Across the globe, Canada ranks near the bottom on greenhouse gas emissions and other indicators. One step above Russia and one below China, and it hasn't improved much.
Canada has a long way to go. Canada has agreed to phase out coal, which is good, but it's the smallest problem. It's really about oil and gas production, which has to be phased down.
In an annual performance review on climate change, ranking emissions, renewable energy, energy use, and climate policy, Canada came in 58th place out of 63.
Canada uses a lot of energy, driving big cars, big houses, and in general the efficiency is not very high, and renewables are lacking behind.
Denmark and Sweden are top performers, but most oil and gas producing countries lag far behind. They say we're not doing enough to reduce emissions. What's your response?
I agree.
Canada's Environment Minister says a comprehensive new plan not tracked in this report is improving Canada's standing.
They haven't looked at everything we've done this year, all the regulations that we're putting out the door, getting net zero emissions vehicle mandated in Canada by 2035, an electrical grid that's going to be net zero by 2035, putting a cap on oil and gas emissions.
COP27 is lurching into its final chaotic week here in Sharm el-Sheikh. Fresh arrivals Monday piling into the problems. One positive sign, Joe Biden's meeting with Chinese President Xi, the two agreeing to resume climate discussions.
To be honest with you, I'm really encouraged. These two big economies, they're not only the biggest emitters, their leadership together really matters in climate.
This week is about countries laying out their promises. India floating the idea that phasing down oil and gas should be included in a final document. That will be hotly debated. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt.
Here's a live shot of Harbour Centre. Johanna will have your full forecast next.
They have tremendous taste, actually. I had one bird that was sick, and I put 4 different kinds of lettuce down there, and it would go through the different types of lettuce, and it found out that it would like romaine lettuce, nothing else. Yeah, his name is Romaine now.
But according to emu farmer Scott Sager, it's not the discerning taste buds of the emu that makes it such a valuable bird these days.
And there they go. They're showing off, and nobody knows why they do it, but all chicks do it. Down, up, jump, and clap their beaks. It's all part of their dance routine.
And no, it's not their fancy footwork either. Emus are hot because emu farmers are banking on the fact we'll want to eat them.
Yeah, we'll see it first in the gourmet restaurants and in the specialty stores and then the supermarkets.
But for now, it's not the meat that's bringing in the big bucks. These birds are being raised as breeders to build up this new speculative industry.
You can get in as low as about $2,000 for a chick at 3 months of age, but your breeding pair is about $25,000, but they also go up in price, and you almost look at it as $1,000 an egg. Take them out of the incubator as carefully as you can. Each egg weighs about 1.5 pounds. With the weight of these eggs, and there's 12 eggs in here.
Last year, Sager sold more than 50 eggs. This year, he expects to sell a lot more.
What do you think when you look at these birds?
I think they're great. I think it's going to be a real great potential for the future, especially for the young people.
Are you going to buy some?
Yes, we're looking at going into it in Alberta.
Would-be emu ranchers are also told about the emu's other uses.
Everything from cowboy boots made from the legs up to fashion skirts, jackets, purses, and so on. Then the feathers are used in the fashion apparel, but the secret ingredient in the bird is about 5 liters of oil, and that 5 liters of oil is a high penetrating oil that can be used in cosmetics, pharmaceuticals. Gonna come for a walk? You'd follow me anywhere, wouldn't you?
Still, it'll be at least 5 years before there'll be enough emu around for most of us to even consider eating them.
Want a little emu?
Well, you never know. Sushi caught on.
It's okay. It's, sure doesn't taste like chicken, though.
Deborah Goebel, CBC News, Powell River.
It's good, yeah. I'd eat it.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Join Kitsand journalist Angela Starrett as she uncovers land theft in Canada in the new CBC British Columbia original podcast, Land Back, out November 15th. and never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox and keep connected with us.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
And senior meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now for a look at the weather. Joe, it was a beautiful day out. What does the rest of the week have in store?
Yeah, if you like today, and I think most of us probably did, the clear afternoon skies after the morning fog, crisp temperatures, but not too deep freezy. We've got more of it ahead, and that's all thanks to this high pressure that's really locked itself in place across BC. We're in a blocking pattern. In fact, for all of North America, the jet stream riding high in the west, keeping that air locked in at low levels and blocking any Pacific system from coming in. That clockwise flow we get around a high is shooting systems up and over instead. So lots more of what we've had, but there are a few caveats to that sinking air that we get with the high pressure. First of all, air quality. And we have an air quality advisory for inland sections of Vancouver Island in through the southern interior, and Prince George, Vanderhoof also under that special air quality. So that sinking air is locking in low-level pollution from industry, cars, and burning fires. So there is also a fire ban, open fire ban burn on the island as well. That fine particulate matter really just there's nowhere to go with that sinking air mass. So that'll be in place for the rest of the week. As this setup is in place for the rest of the week, keep your eye on the cold temperatures, though, across central and eastern Canada. That's the Arctic air mass as this blocked system continues to pull down cold air. First snow for places like Toronto and Montreal coming on Wednesday, whereas we stay dry and fairly seasonal. Now, I say fairly seasonal. The overnights are a little chilly. And again, the clear skies, the third caveat to the high pressure, means any heat we build up during the day just gets radiated away. But generally, if we can get through that morning fog, it'll sort of be a question of how quickly does it burn off in the afternoon. We should be left with those clear skies. There's always a bit of a risk that that fog could hang on right through the afternoon and we get our name Fogcouver. But so far, I think it'll just be an overnight story. Afternoon highs at or just above seasonal, overnight lows, a little on the chilly side. This is the end, so you get to enjoy it guilt-free because we know this dry stretch does have an end, Michelle. So win-win all around.
All right, thanks so much, Joe.
You're welcome.
And that is your late news for Monday. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For news anytime, visit our website. That's cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. Good night.